Say, then for the third archetype, would the Empress be correct and be related to disciplined meditation? Yeah, maybe. Ross says, what do they say? I perceive a mind complex intention of a query, but was aware only of sound vibratory statement. Please re-question. So, all right, ask again. I was asking if the third archetype was the Empress, and was it correct to say that this archetype had to do with discipline meditation? Ross says the third archetype may be broadly be grasped as the catalyst of the mind. Thus, it takes in far more than discipline meditation. However, it is certainly through this faculty that catalyst is most efficiently used. Okay, so yeah, just like intuition, even though they didn't say it, it's a part of it, but it's not really it. So let's read more, and then we'll make a stop. Ross says the archetype 3, which is the Empress and the catalyst of the mind, is perhaps confusedly called Empress, although the intention of this misnomer, I correct myself, the intention of this nomer or name is the understanding that it represents the unconscious or female portion of the mind complex, being first, shall we say, used or ennobled by the male or conscious portion of the mind, thus the noble name. It makes sense actually that the catalyst be female because it's producing. So I don't know, here's a little beautiful poetic description of the first four archetypes. There is the male reaching to the unconscious, matrix reaching to potentiator, and the potentiator is going to generate catalyst for the mind, for the conscious mind to process, right? And that will yield experience. So there is the conscious mind seeking the unconscious, basically in its experiential continuum, that produces catalyst, continuous catalyst. That catalyst may be processed by the conscious mind and then yield experience. So that's why it's female. Seems to me, the female is first the unconscious or the potentiator, which yields another female type of energy or information, which needs to be pondered. See, it needs to be understood. And it's funny actually that in our cultures we have this running joke, which hopefully at this time it's not something that is offensive still. So many things are offensive now. But there is the running joke that women are difficult to understand. That's because they exhibit, most of them exhibit a strong female energy. Duh, obvious. They do exhibit that. That's just like most men exhibit a male energy. And so it is difficult to understand because it is difficult to create logic out of them. But if you have ever lived with a woman, or if you're a woman and maybe you have lived with other women, and maybe you don't understand them, that's also why there is the running joke in culture that men understand each other quite well intellectually, because yes, we use that and we can agree on intellectual terms and all of this. However, women, they don't get along. Again, this is just a generalization. I'm sorry if this is something sensitive, but I don't think you're the kind of audience that would be sensitive to this. So I can speak my mind. But yeah, there is that running joke, right? That's just a generalization, perhaps a stereotype, but it is true. When these energies are manifested and exhibited in such a strong way, then these things naturally need to follow. It is difficult to understand that which is unconscious. But you know that this is why I said if you have lived with women, or you have been able to understand women in this case, then you can see that it's an understanding that doesn't take place in logical functions, but rather in empathizing with whatever their experience is. And perhaps that's a great way to illustrate the way in which we process our own catalyst. You see, because catalyst is not something that we can understand properly intellectually, but rather something that needs to be accepted, you see, and understood in the way of knowledge or knowing, simply knowing the catalyst, right? I'll give some of my own practices, or the way I process catalysts in later on. Probably do it in the conclusions. But yeah, that's how I see it, and that's why I see potentiator and catalyst being feminine, in the sense that they provide this information for the male portion of the mind to deal with in a way that it can use the intellect. It doesn't have to obviate the intellect, but it's more closely related to acceptance without too much logical explanation. That's how I see it. And so, okay, Ra says the archetype 3, I don't know why they say confusedly called the Empress, although the intention of this number is to understand that it represents the unconscious, right? Okay, or female, yes. So maybe the Empress is not. I've known of people that change the name of the archetypes, and I guess that's fine. That's what I find most confusing of studying these, because I don't know, it's just not my thing to see so many different names and interpretations. You have to have a knack for it. So, but yeah, it represents the unconscious or female. So catalyst represents the it's almost like the movement of the unconscious. The unconscious produces catalyst. Portion of the mind complex being first, shall we say, used or ennobled by the male, right? So this archetype is when it's first used or ennobled. I don't know if they are including here the negative path and the positive by saying used by the negative or ennobled by the positive, or maybe they're synonyms. I don't know. But it's important to know over time, when we study the archetypical mind as we go on, that the negative entity wants to abuse the unconscious. It wants to prostitute it. It wants to use it for its own purposes. Whereas the positive, what it wants to do is ennoble it, to court the unconscious mind, to love it, to respect it, to give it its space. That kind of romantic relationship that we find in, again, our cultures, men and women, or I should even say male and female, regardless of gender, because that is a reality. By the male or conscious portion of the mind, thus the noble name. That's why they call it the Empress, because it's a noble part of the process of the mind using catalyst. So that's catalyst.